happy to introduce our next three presentations on the theme of world Englishes and language education in global contexts. The presenters are Jhon Eduardo Mosquera Pérez, Flor Ángela Hurtado Torres, Daniel Elías Pérez Díaz, all from Colombia, and they will give the first presentation, which will be by video. It won't be live. And the next presentation will be by Ritu Parikh in India. And then we will have Patricia Arbona in Argentina giving us the third presentation.
Dear attendees, thank you very much for being here listening to us. In this presentation, we are going to report the findings of a qualitative study that we are currently carrying out in the context of Colombia. And we are working in this study with EFL teachers, and as you can see, it is titled EFL Teachers' Perceptions and Beliefs Regarding English as a Lingua Franca in Colombia. The presentation is going to be held by me, who is Jhon Eduardo Mosquera Pérez, Daniel Elías Pérez Díaz, and Ángela Hurtado Torres, and we are a group of researchers from Colombia. So thank you so much for being here listening to us, and we hope you enjoy this presentation. Before we continue talking about the project itself, we would like to comment by saying that this project revolves around English as a lingua franca, and English as a lingua franca has been defined by multiple authors in multiple ways. For example, some scholars, as is the case of Oskan, Noonan, Seidel-Hafer, have defined English as a lingua franca as the English that is being spoken across the world. However, it is not possible to talk any longer about a single way of speaking English, because according to these authors, English is being used nowadays in multiple settings, as is the case, for example, of academia and other formal and non-formal scenarios. It is possible to find English, for example, in restaurants, people that speak English in offices, and in other settings. So it is not possible to hold any longer that we are learning and using a single way of communicating by using English. It is very interesting because Crystal 2004, for example, and Fan and Renan Jenkins, they have established that for each one of us, native speakers, there are 4 non-native speakers of the language. So we, non-native speakers of the language, have outnumbered the quantity of native speakers. Because of this reason, for example, it is possible to state or to hold that nowadays English has been through a process of indigenization and territorialization. That is basically that English is being influenced by multiple languages, as is the case of indigenous and local languages. And local languages and indigenous languages at the same time are being influenced by this language. So as a result, there is a new way of communicating by means of English. And lexical, discourse, purposing tactics, for example, have been influenced in this way. Let's continue. It is also very interesting, and it is one of the main reasons why we decided to engage in this project, that in the international scenario, the terms English as a lingua franca, English as an international language, for example, world Englishes, global Englishes, have been highly used. However, in Colombia, these concepts, they have just begun to gain interest among scholars. So basically, through this study, we decided to make a contribution to scholarly literature in the context of Colombia by understanding the perceptions and beliefs that a group of EFL teachers, that is in-service teachers, English teachers working in various educational scenarios, have regarding English as a lingua franca, because in Colombia, there is no empirical study of this kind so far. Now let's talk about the first supporting construct of our study, that is theorizing English as a lingua franca. So in the international scenario, and even in Colombia, as I just mentioned, some scholars have been already talking about the English as a lingua franca linguistic phenomenon. Macias 2010, for example, Diego Macias, who is a Colombian scholar, he mentioned that in the international scenario, it is possible to find English as an international lingua franca, English as a lingua franca, English as an international language, global Englishes and world Englishes, as a way to refer to these varieties of the language that are being used nowadays. However, some scholars, as is the case, for example, of Seidel-Hafer 2008, they have been more specific, and they have established that we can make a differentiation. For example, English as a lingua franca, according to this author, can be broadly defined as the type of interaction that native and non-native speakers from any place in the world maintain through the use of English. So basically, lingua franca interaction is when a non-native speaker and a native speaker of the language hold communication through English. For example, a person from the US, and for example, a person from Colombia, because here in Colombia, our first language is Spanish, and we have been taught and learned English as a foreign language. So in that kind of scenarios, the term English as a lingua franca is more frequently used, let's say. It is also important to establish a differentiation between English as a lingua franca and word Englishes. So, according to some scholars, as it was the case of, say, the Haffer, Jenkins, Fan and Rain, David Graul, for example, they have established that basically English as a lingua franca is the interaction that all of us have through English, be native or non-native speakers of the language. And word Englishes, that is another very like common concept in this media of notions, let's say. According to Macias, is or makes reference to different varieties of the language. But in what sense? Let's continue looking at these slides. Excuse me. And in this slide, for example, it's possible to hold that English is divided and is categorized depending on the context in which it takes place. For example, here we have the three circles crash wave model. Professor Braca designed this framework basically to illustrate the way in which English is used across the world. So according to this professor, as you can see, there is an inner circle, and it makes reference to English native speaking countries, as is the case, for example, of the US, the UK, and Canada and Australia, where standard English is mostly tough and used. And the expanding circle countries, for example, the case of Colombia, where we study English as a foreign language because here it doesn't have a legal status in documents and for the government. So it is not like a second language for us. It is more like a foreign language because we studied the language for academic and professional purposes. And other circle countries or nations refers to nations or to settings that were former British colonies. And in this sense, it is possible to find that this circle is confirmed, for example, by Singapore, India, Nigeria, where English has a legal status, and as I just mentioned, where these countries were former British colonies. Let's go back to a previous slide. Okay, let's continue. Basically, word Englishes, according to Macias 2010, makes reference to these new varieties of the language. And these varieties mainly take place in expanding circle countries and in outer circle countries, because as I said at the very beginning of this presentation, English is influencing other languages, and at the same time, other languages are being influenced by English. So as a result of these circumstances, new varieties, new sounds, new ways to pronounce words, for words, phrases, for example, emerge, and these varieties are considered word Englishes. English as a lingua franca, otherwise, is simply like the interaction that people have through English, no matter the place. And now, let's continue to the next supporting construct of this investigation, that was teachers' perceptions and beliefs.
The second supporting construct of this study was teachers' perceptions and beliefs. It becomes fundamental to specify that whereas teachers' perceptions is more frequently associated with external input and influences, teachers' beliefs relates to a system of ideas and theories that teachers hold about themselves, teaching language learning and their students. In a few words, it is possible to affirm that teachers' perceptions is more related to external influences, while teachers' beliefs is more commonly associated with an inner system of ideas and thoughts derived from continuous exposure to the former. When we looked into scholarly literature, we established that many studies have been carried out in a context of these two areas. For example, we found that in the international arena, studies revolving around teachers' perceptions and beliefs on their approaches to language teaching and learning and cyberbullying appear to be the most recurring themes when it comes to research on the aforementioned area. Interestingly, many of these areas and others, including teachers' perceptions and beliefs on social issues, on continuous professional development, on language assessment, and on the teaching practicum and the integration of technology in EFL contexts, have also been addressed in the Colombian context. Well, although some of these studies have contributed to a better understanding of EFL teachers' perceptions and beliefs in connection with different areas of knowledge in Colombian ELT, some of these have also shed light on the fact that EFL teachers' beliefs and practices sometimes differed a little bit from what takes place in reality. In this sense, for example, Munoz, 2012, implemented a research study aiming to explore a group of 62 teachers' beliefs about language assessment. By means of surveys, written reports, and interviews, the authors established that there was a contradiction between what participant teachers believed about language assessment and between what they really did in the practice. In a similar vein, Torregosa Mesa 2014 carried out a thesis project to analyze the relationship that exists between English teachers' beliefs about the concept of communicative competence and their practices at the university in La Guajira, Colombia. The results reveal that English teachers have different beliefs related to the concept of communicative competence, and even if they stress having a clear understanding of this concept, in their practices it was not fully addressed. Hence, it is suggested that more research studies on EFL teachers' perceptions, beliefs, and their practices that take place within the formal classroom context is being necessary. The previous situation led us to conclude that while different studies on teachers' perceptions and beliefs have been developed in both the international and the national scenarios in Colombia, it becomes necessary to continue doing research in this area so as to have a wider understanding of its intersection with other areas that have not been addressed yet. It is the case, for example, of the intersection between EFL teachers' perceptions and beliefs and English as a lingua franca. Considering all what we have been suggesting until now, this study constitutes a contribution to both areas of knowledge in the country, English as a lingua franca and EFL teachers' perceptions and beliefs. Well, now, in terms of the research design, for the implementation of this study, we followed a qualitative descriptive methodology research. In the first place, framing our investigation within the qualitative tradition was beneficial for the whole investigative process, as it did not only allow us to examine, but to better understand and to make meaning of a phenomenon that might take place within the context of both the social, cultural, and educational dimensions, as stated by Creswell 2018, Hill 2007, and Saldaña 2011. In addition to this, following the principles of descriptive methodology was favorable for this study because, according to Herrera and Mosquera and Gonzalez Melendez 2021, when we talk about perceptions, beliefs, and suggestion, this approach is the most adequate as it allows us to deeper and better understand the meaning that individuals ascribe to certain social groups, give to the phenomena that take place in social, cultural, and educational settings. Well, in terms of the instruments that we use in order to collect the data, we decided to implement some questionnaires, narratives, and semi-structured interviews. In terms of the setting, we decided to contact professors and teachers from different social, cultural, and educational contexts. In terms of the participants, well, we send the invitation via email to 50 EFL educators, and we end up working with 6 English teachers who accepted to partake in these investigations. So the characteristics that we took into account in order to work with the teachers were that they had to be in service English language teachers, they had to work in either public or private settings, and they had to have to be active, within the field for at least 2 years.
Concerning the researcher's positionality, we were 3 full-time language professors working within the context of a private university located in the urban zone of Tunja. Tunja is a city that is really close to the capital of the country, Bogota. At the moment we met and we started this research, we had different research interests such as material design, decolonial theory, critical literacy, language assessment, among others. However, we really wanted to implement this investigation because we strongly believe that this is vital to continue fostering the detachment of the idealized native speaker models, as it is indicated by some authors like Guerrero, Jenkins, and Biafara. These also give us opportunity to contribute the detachment of the inner circle dynamics, but also to consolidate a new research agenda. Now, regarding the data collection instruments, 3 data collections were used for this study: a questionnaire, a narrative, and a semi-structured interview. Firstly, let's talk about the questionnaire. So implementing a questionnaire allows us to have an initial approximation to the participants' understanding of this phenomenon being under study. However, since the questionnaires appear to be predominantly quantitative in nature, as it is indicated by Dornevi 2014, we decided to incorporate into this instrument some open-ended queries to get more descriptive responses from our participants. So here we have an example of it, of some of the questions that were implemented in these questionnaires, where the participants indicate that for them, they really know the different varieties that English, the language has, different than styles in United States, England, Australia, and they are really conscious about it. And they also, for example, indicate that they try to emulate the pronunciation of native speakers. For them, they are also an influence of the United States. So like that influence makes the teachers to try to copy or to mirror the accent. But for them, for some of the other participants, it doesn't mean that if they have a proper accent, it means that they are bad professors. I mean, it is not something that is totally linked. So this is about the questionnaires. In terms of the narratives, well, the narratives didn't only have the function of expanding the initial data that we have obtained. Beyond that, it led us to understand participants' perceptions and beliefs from an epic perspective, increasing even more the degree of reliability of this study. So narratives, we had, like in this part, they developed deeply the answers that they did in the questionnaires. So for them, for example, in this case, is the pressure that the professors have for trying to make native pronunciation. They feel that. For others, they say that if you can communicate in a standard English, you are a good professor. Somewhere, some of the answers that our participants indicate in this study. Now, and finally, in terms of the semi-structured interview, applying this instrument was beneficial to deeper inquire into the participants' replies. Nevertheless, we deem it necessary to mention that the main intention underlying this implementation of these final instruments was constructing the data we had initially obtained with the new data that we retrieved from this last one. So consequently, all the instruments contributed to the obtention of a solid position when it comes to the understanding of the perceptions and beliefs that participants of the EFL teachers have regarding English as a lingua franca. So let's continue now with the preliminary findings, Professor Jhon.
Okay, Professor Elias, thank you very much. In this order of ideas, we are going to cover the final presentation, the final part, the section of the presentation, and it has to do with the findings that we have obtained so far. So as you can see, the first category, the first partial category or preliminary finding, excuse me, is called English as a lingua franca is still a contracting field, while the second one is called from material consumers to material designers in the need to incorporate principles of ELF, English as a lingua franca, into locally sensitive VLT materials. So let's continue and let's talk about the partial findings we have established so far. In relation to the category number one, it was possible to establish to determine that while participants are like kind of aware, conscious of the importance of English as a lingua franca and of other existing varieties for the formation, for the education of students and people in general, they still recognize that incorporating those principles and those varieties in the formal language classroom context is kind of difficult because of the multiple circumstances that take place within this space. For example, in Colombia, we have a tendency to favor standard varieties of the language, as is the case, for example, of American English and British English or British pronunciation, because we have been taught in this way for many years. So it is observable in the data retrieved from the participants in the sense that they manifested, for example, the following. Yes, I think that there are preferences in academia for varieties coming from the US and from the British context, because most of the materials we have used, they say here in this fragment, most of the materials we have always used highlight these kind of pronunciations, let's say, and they also commented that the Ministry of Education of Colombia also favors these dialects of English. So because of these reasons, it's kind of difficult to go against what is established. They also comment in the following slide, for example, that it'll be very worthy to highlight and to incorporate other like varieties of English, as is the case, for example, of European English or Asian English in the classroom context, because in that way students will have like the motivation to use the language more actively, because one of the issues with students sometimes is that because of the pronunciation they don't try to speak, because if they don't sound, for example, of these people as these native people, they may feel kind of like bad, let's say, when using the language. So in international scenarios, as you can see, English is spoken in different contexts, and incorporating or using and exposing these variety, these students to these varieties will, of course, like developing them like a higher like level of awareness of how English is used in real context, because if we continue like attaching, like following standards from native varieties, let's say from the UK and from the US, that is like the most spread way of English we use, they will simply like try not to like use their own lexical, their own pronunciation, let's say. So their motivation will be highly like will not be that high. The participant also manifested that it will be, of course, something very beneficial, because, as I have been mentioning, in that way people have the chance of getting acquainted with other varieties of the language. However, they continue recognizing that it's totally difficult, because in Colombia we have this neoliberal system of education, let's say, and it has been also like supported by some others, as is the case, for example, of Guerrero 2008. Guerrero 2009, Correa Nusma 2013, Escobar 2013, and Valencia 2013, who have established through several discourse analysis studies that in Colombia, even language policies favor those varieties of the language, as is the case of the US and the UK, and even indigenous languages, even other foreign languages, as is the case of German, Polish, and French, and so on and so forth. They are not tough or favored within the country, because English has privileges and advantages. And Mabub 2011, for example, called this the industrialization of English. And in Colombia, this is highly observable, because in Colombia, teaching English is a business most of the times. Because in Colombia, English is tough under a very like instrumentalizing perspective, let's say, because we have been taught that if, for example, if you don't speak the language, you are not going to be a global person, and if you are not a global person, you are not going to simply receive the advantages and the benefits that speaking English may bring to your life. So basically, in the educational Colombian context, here there are many myths around English, and that is one of the consequences of historical homogenization in the field. Let's continue. And the category number two, the category two we were able to establish was, or is titled, From Material Consumers to Material Designers, in the need to incorporate principles of ELF into locally sensitive ELT materials. Because nowadays applied linguistics and, Colombian English language teaching scholars are like fighting against these situations. We have noticed that, for example, in Colombia, materials brought from abroad are one of the main like instruments in like that perpetuate the establishment, let's say, of hegemonic forces. Because of this situation, in many places, in many educational scenarios in Colombia, it's possible to mention they use materials for ELT, but one of the consequences is that, for example, the students, they are not exposed to real life situations, let's say, and for example, they are exposed to information having to do with New York, with the UK, with the US, but they don't see information and they are not exposed to information coming from other places where English is also used. For example, they don't commonly read in English about indigenous communities. So one of the motivations we could say that we have for making this project was also like to inquire into the materials that were being used, and we found this situation. It was really intriguing for us to observe that materials continue to favor standard varieties of the language, and because of these circumstances, it is not possible to like to spread or to expose students to other varieties, as is the case, for example, of Colombian English or Latin American English or even other kinds of English within the same United States, because Latin countries and African American people and people from Asia and from other communities, they have also been influenced in the way in which language is being used in this territory. Uh, our participants also mentioned that the books that they receive in the schools in the respective educational scenarios are very limited in terms of language, and they make an emphasis on English on on the American variety. So when the students listen to the audios, for example, they only are exposed to one or two varieties, so they are like kind of learning the kind of like English they should speak, let's say, and because of these circumstances. There are ideologies that get shaped. So another recommendation we make, departing from this information and from this situation, is for teachers to create their own materials. We're trying to make an attempt here in Colombia, in ELT, in the national and local scenario, and we are trying to like to design our own materials. And for example, in this attempt, we are incorporating social issues, as is the case of LGBT situations, for example, or Englishes, for example, and many sociocultural like issues that have been affecting Colombian society, because according to Guerrero 2008, it was another situation of the situations that were taking place in the country, that here we use materials directly like brought from the US and from inner circle countries, but we don't design our own materials. So we are in this moment trying to go against that imposed methodology, let's say, of work. It was also very interesting because we made an attempt, and honestly, we didn't find any material revolving around where English is or English as lingua franca. So the continuation of our project is going to revolve around that situation: how to design materials, for example, bearing main principles of ELF, because it is highly necessary. Of course, we are not like seeking people to speak other varieties of the language. For example, we are not trying to make people speak African English, let's say, or we are not making an effort to make people speak Colombian English. But what we are like trying to do with and through these initiatives is to simply like recognize our existing varieties, because for many years they have been disregarded in the field. And finally, we have here another fragment of these participants, retrieved from these participants. And they mentioned that, for example, these texts, they are not, well, what I was saying, highlighting the existence of other types or dialects or accents of English, let's say. And in the country, it has been kind of difficult because they have tried, honestly, they have tried to to make people aware of the existence of these varieties and these scenarios in which English is being transformed. But because of the circumstances, it's kind of difficult for them because, for example, in Colombia, we assess our students based on international standards. So at the end of their education, we expect these students, these people, to have achieved at least a B1 level of English. And people think that if, for example, they study other like varieties, they are not going to achieve those standards. So it's kind of difficult. And even teachers, they have said that they have tried to sound as a native speaker because historically we have been taught that way. So it is an issue of ideologies, let's say, but also material design, and it's also about ELT and applied linguistics. Definitely, as I just mentioned, we are not trying to convince people to speak African English or Japanese English or Australian English or other kinds of English. But what we are trying to do with these materials and with these initiatives is simply to make people aware and to respect all other varieties of the language, because according to Macias 2010, if we teach other accents and we use materials for doing so, people will be exposed first to real word communication, and second, they will be aware of the richness of English across the world. So thank you so much for our presentation, and it was very interesting to have spoken here to all of you. A lot.
The next presenter is Ritu Parikh from India.
Good evening, all of you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for the opportunity given to me. Which I have chosen for this presentation is language education, global issues, perspective, and challenges. The reason why I have chosen this topic, this is something which we come to know, which we confront, especially during the last 2 years, the COVID days, when language education is not merely confronted only with the language. Something should be there, like global education, either it be global education or it be students should not only be concerned with the language which they are learning, even they should be aware about whatever globally what is happening. And for them, how language can be a helpful tool. That's what my focus will be on today. So to start with, what actually global education is. So global education is actually an approach to teaching and learning language, which is intended to respond to some critical global issues. It is aimed at facilitating students to effectively and actively acquire certain language they learn, along with enriching them with knowledge, understanding, and commitment to positively respond to global problems. So basically, global education is considered to be education which supports knowledge, views, attitudes, and skills related to live life with high responsibilities for multicultural and interdependent world. Now, why English as a global language? The reason is very, very simple. English is today a language which has acquired 3/4 of the world's mail. Almost half of the world's technical and scientific journals are in this particular language only, that is English. So you can see here the data, around 50% of all the newspapers, 80% of all the information available in computers is in the language, either it be pilots or sea captains, movies, songs, more of a business, everything it focuses and everything deal using this particular language only. That's the reason why English is chosen as a global language. Here also you can see this color, the color pink actually represents the area where English is spoken as a second language. So apart from the native language, English is used most of the time with about 2 billion people use English as the language they're comfortable with, either because of any reason. Now, talking about when we focus on, as here my English classroom actually comprises of students from different backgrounds. In India, then too, English, the dialect, the accent of English changes from region to region. We have so many regions over here, even in religious terms as well, English do change. So how in English classroom, what sort of global issues can be raised and how they can be sorted out using this language? So as I mentioned earlier, the responsibilities of second language that is English, the responsibility actually not only concerns only with teaching vocabulary or grammar or pronunciation or listening. Educators, especially English teachers, need to pay attention to some problems as well occurring in the world and if teachers are focused towards the problem, then they can equip their students with knowledge and skills to actively participate in solving the problems, or at least show some sympathy to those issues. We directly, quite possible, we may not be able to solve those issues, but our attention, our sympathy, and understanding towards that situations are essential to spread, like how to come out of that particular problem itself. And talking about these issues, what we can say, I just missed out something. So when talking about global issues and challenges, one of as language educators, the most tangible action related to global problem is UNESCO's Lingua PEX program. What this program is all about? So here you can see, as it is from the Latin word, which means lingua is language, lingua, and peace is PEX. So it refers to language teaching for international understanding to promote peace. So basically, this Lingua PEX resulted some recommendation as well. It focuses on knowing and understanding the responsibilities to support international understanding in the teaching and learning processes. It says the effectively use of language teaching and learning process to increase respect, peace, and cooperation among countries in the world. It also says that it also focuses on developing international understanding through extracurricular activities, for example, some international student exchange programs and so on. So by this Lingua PEX program, it is clear that the importance of equipping students with global knowledge is inevitable. The problems might not be around us or far from surrounding, but our effort to introduce our students to the issues occur all over the world have significant impact to the development of the world. Now the next thing is how to integrate global education to English classroom. So EFL, English as a foreign language or English as a second language, educators have tried to integrate global problems with global education into the teaching and learning classroom. So what it includes some integration to the content technique, to teaching material, lesson plan, teacher training programs, and some other activities as well. So let's start with what actually content integration is. Integrating global education to the content of teaching and learning process can be done through LSRW skills, that is listening, speaking, writing, and reading resources. Teachers can teach all these 4 skills by using issues related to global, like some of the global issues can be raised, and these skills can also be enhanced, such as like some of the topics which can be included can be international human rights, international peace, international health issues, or even any issues related to anti-racism movements as well. So what basically teachers can do is they can start with teaching listening to students by playing audios or videos related to some global issues, on to how for example, how UN has been working so far to uphold human rights internationally and equality for human beings in the world. And for the same, reading sources can also be there. Some passages can be floated to the students related with the world issues. And similarly, writing and speaking skills, students, with this, what will happen? Students will be, on one hand, they'll be aware of the issues concerned, like globally, whatever issues are there. And from their end, they'll be problem solver. They'll try to solve the problem within their group. So quite possible if one student is not aware about whatever is going on around, like internationally, what is going on, he or she quite possible might be aware of these small activities. And later on, they can try from their side to how to resolve these issues too. So this integration is actually intended to adapt the teaching and learning material to be more related to global issues. Besides this, students will enrich and teachers' knowledge will also enhance, because many times nowadays students are quite aware. They know everything, whatever is happening. So quite possible as teachers, if we miss out something, students too can help us in that. So in other words, both teachers and students can gain benefit and added more value from this adaptation. Talking about teaching methods or the methods of teaching. So how we teach global education to students in the classroom is a very important factor, because here motivation is required for the teacher and for the student as well. What happened, because using these techniques, it will motivate teachers and students to start using active learning instead of passive one. Besides, the teaching and learning process will be a student-centered teaching and ends up with the paradigm of teaching language for communication with world issues. So some of the very common methods which teachers can use in classroom can be experimental learning, role-playing, discussion, for example, like these sort of activities teachers can use. Now, what sort of talking about in the classroom, because many times we cannot say that all the material is available for global education. I do agree that a lot of material is not available, but it can be created. So global education actually intended to introduce and expose students to knowledge, skills, and attitude, which will lead them to socially responsible citizens and students. Textbooks might not be helpful. So what we can do as language educators who find difficulty in finding any resources or textbook, they can create their own teaching material, because wide range of topics are available on many global issues like party, modernization, historical sites in world, peace, human rights, respect. There are a lot of global issues which are there, and focusing on all these issues, teaching material can be developed from teachers' end as well. They can also access some online resources related to these issues, such as from YouTube or from sites by English-speaking countries, embassies as well, like British Council and Cambridge Assessment English as well. So this again and again, it will benefit to teachers and students, especially for the teachers. This will give them more chances to be more independent teachers and improve their positive attitude towards their surroundings and obviously new challenges which will be there. Now, why these strategies are actually required? Why it is actually necessary? Because what will happen apart from the textbooks, if we try to include these sort of things in the classroom, it will allow them to be more, like, as I said earlier, they'll try to resolve the issues which are there. And it will also expand the role of the language teacher. Students will be they'll try to solve the problem, they'll try to solve the issues focusing on the problems. These strategies are very simple, they are flexible, there are no strict parameters to be followed for all these strategies. So it can be taught easily to students of any region, because here in India, as I said earlier, isn't keep on changing from region to region. And then too, a lot of things are there, which, a lot of students are from different backgrounds. And these strategies can be a very useful and helpful tool in enhancing not only their language tools, but will expand their knowledge as well. Talking about their importance, so these are actually tools for active self-directed involvement, and they are essential for developing communicative competence as well. They can definitely help students to become better language learners. Now, every strategy which we use, it need to have some sort of purpose, some sort of objective can be there. So I have here categorized objective in three different categories. Quite possible objective can be when we wish to communicate with others, or we want to present our information either in oral form or in written form, or it can be what you actually want to do. So here there are different purposes which can be, like, we can categorize all these purposes according to the strategy and according to the objective which we have. And for the same, we require, for example, suppose if we wish to communicate with others, we can access different information sources. Role play can be one important exercise. And again, while presenting information either in oral or in written form, these strategies, I mean, the purpose can be we want to talk ourselves, we want to make predictions, and like what we want to do. So focusing on that, we can have a definite purpose, and using that, we can apply these strategies. So now to sum up, to conclude this, actually world problems are not only the response. Many a times we all know like what sort of problems are going on. We do discuss, yes, these sort of problems are there, but we cannot be escapist. So world problems are not only the responsibilities of those directly related to those issues. The problems are also our responsibility as educators, as students, as human beings. They are also our responsibilities. And education can be used to build peace in the world. Through education, leaders are created. And through education, problems can be reduced and solved. So thus our work hard as educators is essential for this better world. And especially as English language teachers, and an English language teaching can be adapted to meet the demand of the global condition. Finally, to the success of adapting global issues to English language teaching is affected by some factors as well. Especially the most important thing which is required is teachers' willingness, and at the same time, readiness to deal with the issues by inserting them to the teaching material. This is, as I said earlier, the most important thing which is required. If a teacher, if educator is aware of what is going on, and if he or she wants the students to focus on these problems, not only the problems, but also their solution, then definitely something can be done. And at the same time, support from the government to teacher is also a determining factor. And how it can be done? Because support such as like various teacher training programs can be involved from government side. They can support them because it can be a determining factor. Because if by following all these teacher development program and training programs, teachers can conduct teaching and learning process, which can reveal, they'll get more exposure to world problems and increase, and with them, it will be a helpful tool to increase students' awareness towards such programs. That's all from my end. Thank you so much for your patience and time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ritu.
Thank you.
So, Patricia Arbona.
Thank you very much. Well, before starting, a big thank you to the organizers for the invitation. The topic is teaching English as an international language. Today we are undergoing a process of transformation in English teaching and learning. The reason is simple. English is no longer treated as a foreign language. It has become a lingua franca because it is the tool for international communication, and it is mainly used by speakers whose mother tongue is not English. This has given rise to a variety of accents which has affected the language, especially pronunciation. This movement started in the late 90s, and it has become the most significant language development of the 21st century. For this reason, we should redirect our teaching aims and prepare our students to become effective communicators of English around the world. Now, the question is, what are the changing paradigms? First of all, the aims have changed. Today, the focus is on intelligibility and functional communicability. These new aims have relieved the pressure the students usually feel when they have to sound like native speakers. This means that native-like pronunciation is no longer the main aim. Perhaps the most important work on intelligibility has been presented by Jennifer Jenkins. In the year 2000, she published The Phonology of English as an International Language, in which the main aim was mutual intelligibility among non-native speakers. In her research, she studied different types of conversations between non-native speakers, and she found that pronunciation features were more important than others. In order to improve global understanding of English, she created the Lingua Franca core, which is a list of main pronunciation features which are normally followed when teaching and learning English as an international language. Of course, this Lingua Franca core has undergone modification through time, but the thing is that we have a guide that can be followed in order to give the students what they really need. Now, what are the benefits of focusing on intelligibility? First of all, the aims are more practical, more achievable and reasonable, because students can recognize their own accents. There is no need to speak like native speakers. Then exposure. Exposure is more important than ever. This means that students need to listen to authentic material in order to learn how the language is produced and used. Students need to know that accent is identity, and accent is our linguistic passport. And we all speak English with an accent cannot be eradicated. Well, another benefit is that pronunciation takes a crucial role in the process of teaching and learning. We should remember that pronunciation and intelligibility are closely related. They form a binomial. And for this reason, students need to develop pronunciation skills in order to become effective communicators of English around the world. Something very important to be taken into account is that we need to focus on pronunciation features. That is to say, when we analyze English phonology, we distinguish two types of features: essential, which include phonemic distinctions, word stress, which facilitates segmenting of speech, and highlighting or nuclear stress, and superficial features, which include those which do not affect the meaning of what is being said. For example, linking words, unstressed words, and phonetic processes. Noonan has said that it is not just what we are listening to, but also what we are listening for. This means that the students need to know that when they are trying to understand what a person is saying, they need to concentrate not only on the meaning of the words, they need to interpret the meaning beyond words that is often provided by paralinguistic information. For this reason, it is very important to make them know that communication includes both verbal and non-verbal communication. Verbal communication includes words, but words are not accompanied alone. They are enhanced, their meaning is enhanced by paralinguistic communication, which includes tone of voice and prosody. Prosody includes rhythm and intonation. Words are also enhanced by body language. This paralinguistic information is very important, and it is usually ignored, as they provide important information, and we are learning a language that is spoken by speakers around the world. They provide important information that today cannot be ignored. Why? Because this helps students understand better. Well, what do students need to know? Productive and receptive competence. Productive competence is the ability to produce intelligible speech. So the focus is on speaking and developing productive skills. It is important to highlight the fact that exposure and practice are key to successful language use. And remember that students need lots of exposure and learning is best achieved by doing. Students need to know phonological distinctions and the essential features I have mentioned. Why? Because there is economy of effort and they concentrate on what is really important. Another important piece of information they need to know is that we do not speak in individual words. We speak in chunks, in divisions, breath groups. And each chunk contains words which are important and unimportant. So normally they need to concentrate on content or lexical words and forget those which are linking the important ones. The focus should be on fluency, not on grammar or accuracy. What is important is that the students have to communicate effectively. In order to be able to become effective communicators, they need to have a battery of conversation devices to keep the conversation going, to avoid breakdowns in communication. Normally, we use them for repairs. For example, we may ask for further explanation, repetitions, reformulations. Okay, so these strategies are crucial. They should also develop receptive competence, that is to say, the ability to understand what is being said. But before dealing with this type of competence, they need to know that listening is a super skill which provides them with superpowers. And it is an active process because when we are listening, 3 processes are performed simultaneously. And this is something that students usually ignore. First, we understand the sequences of sounds and the meaning of words. At the same time, we interpret the emotional load that is present in what we are saying. And we are also recognizing the body language that accompanies what is being said. In order to get, to grasp what is happening when we are listening, of course, students need lots of exposure and, of course, different types of Englishes. They need to concentrate on the essential pronunciation features, to pay attention to chunking and produce also this type of divisions and concentrate on meaningful words. And they need to pay attention to verbal and non-verbal information. This means that the focus should be on language usage, linguistic context, and background knowledge to understand what is being said. So, in order to communicate effectively, students need to develop 2 different types of competencies. Communicative competence, which is an individual process. It is the ability to know the language and how to use it appropriately. And interactional competence is a collective process, because it deals with the co-construction of meanings when we are engaged in a conversation. Remember that when we are having a conversation, there is a lot of negotiation to keep the conversation going. For that, we need these conversation devices I mentioned before. And drama is the tool that we can use in the classroom in order to give the students the opportunity to interact using different types of activities. Well, in order to be successful teachers and to give the students the opportunity to be successful learners, we need to take into consideration that they should pay attention. They should focus on real everyday language, the language that may be found outside the classroom. The focus should be on meaning, remember, not on form. They need to concentrate on language usage, that is to say, the communicative value of what is being said. For that, they need to develop oral skills. How? Well, 2 different types of work, group and pair work. Remember that interactions should be present in the classroom, and we need to devote time to letting them practice the language orally. Of course, that assessing is present, but now the focus will be on oral work. This means that written tests will be reduced because normally we use them for checking grammar. And there is tolerance for errors. Why? Because the classroom becomes a laboratory where the students experiment with language. There is a lot of trial and error, so mistakes are expected. And what is important is that metacognition should be present in the classroom because the students should reflect on their own learning. They should become observers of their own progress and discover their weaknesses and strengths in order to improve the process of learning. Well, finally, as I want to introduce food for thought, and it is just a question. What makes English oral communication easier today? In order to answer this question, I think that we need to reflect on our students' language needs and on our teaching practices. Remember that today it is easier to learn the language because it has become more flexible, because today we concentrate on what is important, and the main aim is communication. So I think that if you give it a try, you will see that the students will feel more confident, and we will feel as teachers more comfortable because we know that we will be able to achieve our aims. Well, thank you very much, and I'm all ears to listen to your questions.
Hi, it's Rashid Young. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought your presentation was great. And
Thank you.
I have a question about your drama. You said that you use drama as a way to, what is that, to encourage dialogue or to, okay. So I wrote, can you provide an example from your practice or from your experience that has been effective with your students?
Yes, of course. Yes. Well, I'm a drama teacher. That's why I always advise to use drama. And of course, I use it with my students. The idea is that drama provides a variety of activities in which the students have the opportunity to practice verbal and non-verbal language, because normally non-verbal language is not taught because drama is not included as a resource in the classroom. When you discover that drama is important for helping the students improve their language, because it is a way of learning by doing. So the students realize that there is no need to fill up blanks or written activities. They discover that by doing this type of activities, they learn more comfortably and they become more confident with the language. So I think that if you give it a try, you will see how the students change the approach they have to learning, because they become active participants. And today, one of the most important aims is to give the students the opportunity to become active participants and let them be and let them do. So give it a try and let me know, because drama is really great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, a question?
I don't have a question, but I'm just wondering if there are any other questions. This has been such an inspiring presentation.
Thank
Really
you.
very enjoyable. Really
I do have a question. Thank you.
Sure, go ahead, of course.
Patricia, that was a wonderful presentation. And as you're mentioning and talking about drama, it was just kind of like an aha moment in terms of how we teach, but we don't put that actual physicality into it, because that is actually what happens a good percentage of the time when we're communicating. And I'm just wondering, from that perspective, would you consider in our classrooms when we're doing things like presentations and group discussions, would you consider that an offshoot of that dramatization that you're speaking of, or does it need to be more intentional than just that?
No. The thing is that when students get engaged in an activity in which they become active participants, it may be a debate, a discussion, it may be role playing, simulations, any improvisations. I love improvisations with trainee teachers, because they need to speak on the spur of the moment. There is no time for presentation, and they really enjoy these type of activities because they are, at the same time as they are using metacognition, they are assessing their own production, and this is great. I think that metacognition, as I said before, should be present, but drama also promotes metacognition. We need to reflect on our own teaching, and we should encourage our students to reflect on on their own learning. And this is great. Well, I could go on speaking for ages. So probably in another meeting, we could go on speaking about this, because for me, it is amazing. I love it.
Well, Patricia, your enthusiasm is contagious. So thank you very much, Patricia Arbona. We really appreciate this. And thank you, Nicholas, for that question. Very engaging and insightful question. Thank you very much. So with that,
I will stop sharing.
Thank you. So
Thank
with
you.
this, thank you to all 5 of the presenters in this previous section of the program.